Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ. I am Mike Musto. Dan Stoner is on vacation this week, so, well, he's not here. But what we do have is a very special guest by the name of Rich Waitas from Magnaflow. Now, for those that don't know Rich, you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. Rich is one of the nicest guys, one of the most knowledgeable guys, but engineer, fabricator, has worked in the industry for a long time, works on movie cars, has worked on movies like Batman, the Transformers, and a whole bunch of other stuff, Fast and the Furious. His stories are pretty spectacular. And again, just an all-around wonderful, wonderful gentleman. But as you know, before we start the podcast, we always go to the Hemmings Classifieds, of which we have 25,000 to 30,000 cars at any given time, plus our Hemmings auctions at Hemmings.com. And we pull a car that I feel, or Dan feels, kind of represents to a point, the guest that we're going to have on. After you hear this, you could type in the comments and say you agree with my pick or not. Now, the car that I've chosen is a 1989 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEC Euro coupe, big Mercedes coupe from the 80s. I have been a fan of these cars for the longest time, and the reason is this. And the reason I picked it for Rich is extremely humble, extremely understated, unbelievably talented, can do more stuff than most people can even dream of. And he has that performance to back everything he says up. Thus, this Mercedes immediately came to mind. I'm like, if Rich was a little European guy that didn't live in Southern California, what would he be? And I have like this car. And part of it, it's also, I've known Rich for a long time. He is a muscle car guy to an extent. This is a big 300 horsepower German super sedan from the 80s. Just a wonderful car. So, Rich, this is what I got for you. You are now a Mercedes, at least to the viewers at Hemmings, until you tell us differently. So, guys, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in about 3 seconds with Rich Waitas from Magnaflow. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Hot Rod BBQ. As mentioned earlier, our special guest is Mr. Rich Waitas from Magnaflow. Now, I said it once, I'll say it before. One of the best guys in the industry, one of the nicest, most humble guys in the industry, who I will tell you he's forgotten more about this industry and cars and fabrication than you'll probably ever know. So, and he won't tell you that. That's my job. So I'm telling you that. Rich, it is so great to have you on the barbecue, man. How you doing?
I thought we were going out for barbecue. I didn't realize we were just talking on the telephone here.
Dude, it's pandemic. That is going to happen because we are actually in the process of crafting a mobile podcast studio out of a van.
Ooh, so I like.
Yes. So the next time you are on, we will come to you and we will do it from wherever you want to do it.
Nice. I dig that.
We had this grand master plan, and then COVID kind of shot a torpedo at us, and we were like, son of a bitch, but like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this happen. So
it's going to be pandemic proof and an improvement over typical, live wire via internet stuff.
I hope so. Yeah, I think so. That's the goal anyway. But how you doing, man?
Man, it's been a crazy 2020, and 2021 hasn't let up. And so far, though, good. Went through my health bouts and kind of recovered there. I think everybody had their little moments throughout COVID, but doing pretty good. Good. So before we get into what's happening in the world of Magnaflow and stuff, I'd really like to give people a background as to how you got into this industry. Right. Because you've worked, I mean, not only, you're not only a fabricator, you're not only with Magnaflow, but you've worked on television, in the movies, on movie cars, and just about every facet of it. And your history is quite extraordinary. And I don't think a lot of people know that. So how did you first get into this business? Did you get into fabrication first? Were you always a car guy? Walk us through the story. Well, car guy forever, swapping motors, and believe it or not, everybody knows me now that knows me as a, Chevrolet guy, a GM guy. But that was literally me rebelling against my dad, who was a blue oval Ford guy. So I have a ton of Ford experience. It all started off in driveways, and that's kind of what happened. It was weird because all of our cars that we drove as a family, Ford Econoline van was what we went to and did our camping trips on. We had an LTD wagon, with little cool rumble seats
Yes.
in the back that we used to play
Sure.
gunner in the back end. My mom had a Thunderbird, one of those, and they all had 302s in them because that was how I learned about cars. My dad loved the 302 small block Ford. So everything got a small block V8 Ford motor swapped into it at one point in time with me handing tools into the car. So
Gotcha.
that was kind of what happened at home. The funny part is that my dad, from a performance standpoint, he had a 66 Chevelle, a Firebird.
Oh, wow.
My mom's car was a Firebird, so he kind of leaned on the Chevy stuff for the performance, but our daily drivers were all Ford. So all in all, just American muscle was a
Okay.
big part of my background and wrenching on the driveway.
Okay. Now, you're a California native, correct?
Yeah, pretty much born here. I think between the places I've worked and including Magnaflow, I mean, until we moved down here to Oceanside, I was within like 20 miles of the hospital I was born at in Mission Viejo.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you first started doing stuff like this, okay, so you grew up in an automotive family to an
Yeah.
extent, right? Your father, your mom always had good cars. I love the fact that they drove Firebirds. That's great with a family,
Yeah.
the back seat that's this big and put kids back there. So when did you first get into the industry? And when you were younger, was it always, I want to be in this industry? Did you know you were going to go down that path?
So it was kind of accidental. I mean, I always knew I wanted to be a part of it, whether it was the friend group I chose in high school and the people that I kind of associated with. We were always tinkering with cars. I was always in auto shop as soon as auto shop was available. And it was always a way to meet people, hang out, at the Fuddruckers, at the Wiener
Hmm.
Schnitzel. And, we did car guy stuff. We talked about how fast we wanted to be and how fast we could be and the parts we can't afford and how we got there on a budget. And that was kind of the after work, after school lifestyle that kind of just permeated into every aspect of what I did. But it wasn't my first job. I started off actually in the audio video world and good guys and,
Okay.
started in the sales world. And my technical part, and if, my history, my dad was a aeronautical engineer for a company that subcontracted for aircraft. So I was always exposed to a little bit of technology. And my mom worked for a company called Burroughs and Unisys. So she worked on computers. So
Oh, sure.
home was nerddom, when it came to technical stuff, working with
Right.
computers and whatever, that was always there. And, electronics kind of fascinated me. So my first job drove me down into what would be like electronics. And, that was the heyday of the 90s as consumer electronics and all the things that were happening then. There was still that little tinge. Car audio was in that department that I always kind of looked into and eventually dabbled in, worked in the installation bay at the Good Guys. As well as, in the, behind the counter and some other parts. They liked the fact I could talk to customers about technical things. So they put me into the warehouse control warranty departments and stuff. But it got to the point where I was going to school and I wanted to be able to afford more parts. And I ended up at Pep Boys. And I
Oh,
just went
okay.
there because I thought I would be able to buy parts cheaper. Well, as I grew into what would be kind of my car habits, those weren't the parts I wanted.
Right.
The parts that I wanted were in the catalog and things like that, and they weren't
Sure.
things that I could really get my discount on. And eventually, just kind of getting through the thralls of making enough money to get by, paying off school, and doing those
Hmm.
things, I eventually decided that I wanted to align the two because the more I got into paying bills, the less I was doing the things I wanted to do.
Right.
And there was a time where I left Pep Boys. I didn't have a job for a few months and designed my first exhaust system in CAD because I was going to school for mechanical engineering. I was working my way through Saddleback College and then transferring over to Cal State
Okay.
Fullerton. And I went to my local muffler shop and they had the parts there. And this guy named Dennis was the owner. And I drawn out a CAD system of all the parts with Magnaflow parts because I've been a huge Magnaflow fan on my own before I was here.
Okay.
And half the parts weren't available. So he said, hey, no worries. We'll just jump in your car and pick them up. And I'm like, wait, Magnaflow's here, literally within that 15 miles that I've lived away from my house? I had no idea. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that the company's name on the building was Car Sound. A lot of people didn't know that that was the parent company. So long and behold, here was something that I reached out to in the car world as a brand that I identified with. And that was my first connection. And I found out through building my first exhaust system and designing my first exhaust system that they were literally in my backyard. I applied a few times. They didn't take my application for almost 6 months.
And how old were you when this was happening?
Gosh, this was 1998. I don't even want to count that far back, but that was easily 20 years ago,
Yep.
25 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then, so once you started doing it, were you always interested in fabrication? I mean, coming from having parents that were kind of, obviously engineering and computers, but just the more technical side of things, was it just the fabrication itself of making things work, or what drew you to it?
So it was that, and I had absolutely no skill there. Everything I did was, back in the day, we were using R14, R12, the early formats of AutoCAD that were available,
Sure.
which were really just 2D representations pulled into a 3D atmosphere for you to use, and very complicated and lots of keystrokes to get stuff done. But to me, that's where I could create in my head. I could create designs and I could create functional devices, but I had no means to actually make them work.
Okay.
So Magnaflow didn't need an engineer. They didn't need a manager. I had tons of managerial retail experience. They needed a dyno tech, which, believe it or not, that is something that I did do. My kind of side job I had at Pep Boys is with a friend of mine who's passed, and he owned a place called Andy's Auto. And I used to do tuning calibrations on early C5s and the kind of the fourth gen Camaros as
Sure.
they came out. And I worked there kind of on weekends doing tuning. And that was kind of a friend group I found, going through the Fuddruckers things and
Yeah.
staying with the local crowd. And so I knew dynos. I had lots of dyno time. So I'm like, okay, cool. But guess what? It wasn't cool dynos. This was catalytic converter conversion testing.
Right.
This was sitting on a 1995, I think it was Caprice with a 305
Yeah.
for hours on end, watching light off and triggers and doing pinouts and figuring out how the cats worked on the early OBD2 cars. So,
Right.
but that was my in. And my whole purpose is like, I will do this if someone shows me how to weld. And I went into their
Okay.
welding apprentice program. And that's where I started. I mean, I'll be very honest. It's like I left a job where I was making nearly six figures as a manager in retail to going back to part-time because they didn't need a full-time dyno tech,
Sure.
making $8.80 an hour. Just because I wanted to do something that had a purpose in my life that wasn't just, again, paying bills. Because that's what I got down to was, I was going to work and I really wasn't working with cars, even though I worked at a Pep Boys, work with parts and work with car people. I was managing people. And that was so far away from really what was to me building cars. And this was my first attempt to get back into building cars. I didn't know how to put metal together.
So that's great. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, the more people, and we obviously know a lot of the same people, but you always hear these stories where, and I always ask that question, how did you get into this? And you always hear, people started off on one path and, everybody, making a decent amount of money. And I quit. It's like quitting smoking. I quit cold turkey and took a massive pay cut and went back to reestablish myself in a position that I truly wanted to be in. And I think for, a lot of younger people coming in, like we try to impress upon them, or at least I do anyway, is that it's okay to do that. It's okay to kind of take that leap of faith because, I mean, I was stuck at a job where, I was a manager, I was a vice president in an investment bank. It was the worst, like suit and tie, cubicle.
I can't imagine suit and tie with the beard.
Dude, this would not have been allowed. I mean, can you imagine me? Can you imagine this working at an investment bank? Like not okay, but it's, we always try to tell people like, it's okay to take that jump. It's okay to be scared. Every single person that has done this has been scared and terrified about where that next paycheck is going to come.
Oh yeah.
But so you made the leap. I love the fact that you said, you got to teach me how to weld. So once you got to Magnaflow, all that experience that you had doing catalytic converters and everything, because I don't know if a lot of people know, but catalytic converters is a massive part of Magnaflow, right?
Right. Yeah, catalytic converters is, just today, we're probably talking 75, 80% of what we take in for revenue. So while we appear to be a large performance entity in the exhaust world, that's only the smallest portion of our business when it comes down to why we do the things we do, which is why it feels like when you come in and deal with our brand, that there's a certain degree of refinement and it is bigger than what it seems to be in the box. And a lot of that comes from the fact that we have this supplementary revenue that mixes in between the two different components, the performance and the emission side.
Okay. So let's talk about the performance side of it right now, because Magnaflow has done an amazing job of putting themselves out there from a visual perspective. and everything else. I mean, obviously I've got Magnaflows on my Charger, my Daytona, and my Trans Am. So, and I had them on my Monte Carlo before it got stolen. Like,
Oh,
and
heartbreaker.
it killed me. But I mean, one, I think you have when you unbox like a system, it's a beautiful system. The fitment is great. It's just an overall wonderful product. But from the performance side of it, how did you get into things like the movies and stuff like that? Because that's a really neat, because when we first met, I remember we went down to, it wasn't Picture Car Warehouse where they were doing all the Fast and the Furious cars.
Yeah, no, it was vehicle effects.
Vehicle effects. And that was like walking into a candy store. You just walk in and you're
Yeah.
like, this is amazing. And I think it was Fast 6 that they were doing. It was all the off-road stuff or whatever the case is. So how did you get into that?
So the job here changed pretty dramatically in my first couple of years. That's the one thing that's been pretty enjoyable about working with Magnaflow. It's a family-owned company, still is today, but they don't really work with the idea that you're kind of boxed in under a title. And when I came in, I was literally a test engineer. And then as soon as they told me that they would help me get through this process of welding, and I just needed to get more time to get so I could work with the people that were on the clock, I need to get my tasks done. They hired me at part-time. I just started doing the work more efficiently. And if there's one thing I did do as an engineer was I could do process work. So give me a process, I can find out how to get there the fastest way and repeat and get repeatability and build that. So I kind of changed the program and got to the point where I was done with 25 hours at the work in about 7 hours. Which meant I spent a lot more time learning how to weld. And when I was doing the welding, that kind of pushed me off into getting involved with other projects. And that's when the eyeballs there, and they had a Mike Jones. He's the same Jones that was in JE Pistons, the same Jones who worked for Harvey Crane. He was the same Jones that owned Jones Electronics Technology. And he was our engineering director. And he was a pain in my butt. Basically, he put me to the screws all the time. I was doing flow bench work in my spare time on top of doing the welding and fabrication, but he really put me into the technical aspects because that kind of was my background. He knew that I was a mechanical engineer by trade. So he's like, I'm going to use that. And every time I came up with free time, he would occupy it with more work and I would just keep having to become more efficient. So eventually that led into where I got noticed by the family members and they were like, well, who's this guy who's always here? And I'm sorry, I'm diverging a little bit, but there was a funny joke because Jerry, the owner, would come by on Saturdays and Sundays because I lived 5 minutes from the shop. So you gave me the chance to weld and I was allowed to use any scrap material to practice. Guess what I did on weekends? I practiced a lot. And he'd come by and he's like, who's this guy who's always here? He goes, why do we even pay for an alarm company? He's always there. And it was just, that was the running joke was, okay, well, we don't have to have the alarm. Just call Richard. He's already there. And as I got noticed by that, they were like, well, you seem to have a lot of other skill sets. Can we figure out where that was? So I went from, engineering to working out as a kind of a shop foreman on the floor, and then overhauling happened. And I started meeting some of the people in the TV world. And as that happened, I got introduced to other TV car builders and eventually met Dennis over at Vehicle Effects. So once we got there, they were like, well, you know how to weld, the process by which we build our product, how to fit it on the car. You go over there and you deal with it. So all of a sudden I got stuck in a marketing role where I was negotiating our integrations because I understood how they worked and how to get there. And I could also pick up the torch and do the work.
Right. So you could basically back every question up that they asked you. Like, could we do this? You'd be like, I can show you how, basically. Well,
and that was the part is that if you've seen anything with those movie sets, it's like, hey, we got to build 12 cars next week.
Right.
It's like, so having we got to negotiate. Okay, well, can we get the logo in? We got to get that approved. And then, okay, you've got that approved. Let's go talk to the guy who can do the welding and fabricate. And can he put that on the car on this day and schedule? Well, I can give you an answer right now. I can do all three of them. So that made me very accessible. And once that kind of got around, I was doing Universal's cars. I was doing, we also went into Paramount Pictures. We did the stuff for the Need for Speed movie. But then I became, and even today, they call me up from all the different unions and they're like, hey, exhaust work, you're the guy, help me out. And I end up getting in there and I find a way to work marketing into it. So
that's fantastic. I mean, did you work on Batman too?
Yes, that was probably one of my pride and joys. The last Batmobile, I got pulled in and doing some design work as well as fixing a problem. They had a heating problem with all the fiberglass with the exhaust system because they eventually were going to put a supercharger on it because they just needed to spin the tires to get the thing to
Sure.
slide and maneuver.
Yeah.
They needed more torque. So my goal was to how can we conservatively do so without putting a supercharger, which puts so much more heat under there, more spacing, and
Yeah.
really was much more power than they needed. We just needed a header design that would give us a little bit more grunt down low. And they ended up shaving the tires and getting some water
Sure.
on the ground to do it. But the extra 25, 30 foot-pounds down low was all that was necessary. And they brought me in for the design work and then had to sign all these NDAs. And I got to look at how things fit and work with the guys that were doing the aesthetics on the car. And then I had to go in the next room and build it.
That's got to be such an amazing thing. So when a process like that happens, is it the effects guys that'll call you, or will like the director come over and be like, this is my vision, this is what I have to do, well, this is what you have to do?
Right.
Like how does that process work?
It's pretty cool. I have to say, I'm not a very boisterous person when it comes to, getting out there. And my inner me was giggling like, a 10-year-old kid in a candy store because I'm here talking to the director of Batman versus Superman about what he envisions and what he wants. And his stuff is very, 30,000 feet looking down. He's got all the optics on what it should feel like. And then in the same room, Dennis is in there and he's providing the mechanical direction because he's the one in charge of, okay, well, we need that image that he's created to be functional. And now I got to find those pieces of the puzzle, the exhaust guys, the chassis builders and all that stuff to make it work. And to be in that room alone and watch this think tank happening is just, it's like an absolute pleasure and a joy to be there. Like I said, a fly in the wall is excellent, but the fact that I get to put my input in is pretty amazing. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's all of these power people. And I won't say that there's a whole lot of back and forth. It's kind of the director says, I want this. Dennis says, okay, here's what the resources are. Yes, we can do this. Probably not that, but I can get close to it. And then once we leave and adjourn the room, it's like, okay, guys, here's what we need. Tell me what you're going to do. What's your timeline? And this is how we need to deliver. And we just start the process. So pretty cool.
That has to be, because it's got to be a pinch me moment when you're in that. So like there are times that you just take a step back, you'd be like, I can't believe I'm actually here.
I will tell you, there's a lot of things about Facebook and social media I don't like, but when I get some of those memories back that show me like, hey, I was on the set of Transformers. Like I said, I was, a kid that loves cars. So like, I got to work on Bumblebee. I got to work on, all these cars that were icons to me. And when we had a chance to, Batmobile and then get into the Fast and Furious franchise and then Need for Speed, there was no amount of hours or time or effort I could put in that felt too much because I was like, and don't tell my boss, I would do this for free. I mean, it's like, but I'm getting paid to be here. And they're also wanting me to participate beyond just build the part and get it done.
Yeah.
I had input. And that was a pretty fun time. And I'm not saying that it's not so much the case now. We're not making movies right now. Movies are kind of there. I'm working on a little Michael Bay thing that's coming up, but that'll be out soon, but we'll see. They're just not as frequent. And obviously the car franchises, the last Fast and Furious franchise I worked on was 2 years ago and it should be coming out this summer. So it's funny because like that car to me feels old. I almost don't remember some of the stuff I did to it and it's still embargoed. So I can't share it with anybody.
You can't say anything.
But it's pretty cool. And you're going to see it this summer.
Yeah. I like how you categorized a little Michael Bay thing. Michael Bay has never done anything that's little, right? So I'm curious about that because he doesn't know the word little.
Well, it's not a traditional like I can't say a whole lot, but it's not the traditional like car action flick.
Sure.
So in that case, it's a little in my role in it, but it's pretty cool. The people that I get to work with, whether it's those like movie car people or just the fabricators and builders that I get to be around in there, because I'm not the most talented person in that room when we talk about the guys building the chassis work and the fabrication work and the other companies that are there. So I'm watching some of the best in the industry like over my shoulder going, wow, that's pretty cool. And no one can talk about it. So it's kind of a funny place to be.
So everything, you've got your little group that you can talk about it amongst yourselves and that's it, And I know it's funny because there are certain things that, we know that people outside the industry don't know. And, you'll hear conversations go off in the background and you're like, you can't say anything. You just
oh, goodness. Yeah. And
Yeah,
Hollywood is the worst at that. Everybody's got their perceptions of what happens on the front side, and having that access to what's actually happened behind, it's a totally different story.
yeah, no, I totally agree. So, okay, so let's go back to fabrication for a second.
Yeah,
And I want to go back to getting people and more so getting kids into fabrication and these type of skill sets. And you had mentioned, like, when you were a kid, when you were in school, you would do shop class or auto shop or whatever the case is. Those programs are pretty much gone
yep,
now. And it's such a sin because, you know, it's one of the, not everybody I think is meant to go down the path of college and go every place else. And I
sure.
think that there are skills like fabrication and welding and there's so many other things out there. Do you have problems or do you have issues getting younger people into the trade and saying you need to learn how to fabricate, you need to learn how to do this? Has that been any type of problem for you guys?
Absolutely. I mean, the trade is aging with the business. So, when we're looking at guys that are in the welding business, they get older as old as we are. So every year that we put out, notice, hey, we're looking for new fabricators and welders to assist in our research and development program. That person is also 2 years older than the last time we requested. They're the
Right.
same guys that went through and have that business. And I don't know. The only thing I can remember is going to school, and I got involved when the quote unquote higher education portion. But my
Sure.
guidance counselor back then, and this is in the 90s in high school, was like, work smarter, not harder. It was that push away from blue collar work into, oh no, you want to get into technology, you want to be a doctor, a
The
lawyer,
same thing. Mine.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So it was that, and the weird part is I did go down that path, but then I reverted back to doing the
Same
things that I
thing.
was comfortable with. So uh, today I think it's the same challenge. Schools are still pushing for that stuff, and to be honest, I believe it's just because, and I'm going to put myself in a weird place for saying it, is that it's harder to get people involved with trades at school because it takes someone who's passionate and talented to want
Yeah.
to transmit that message. Whereas in a textbook telling history, well, guess what? Read the words. They're there.
Right. Right.
Whereas getting somebody to go into auto shop, I know my auto shop teacher, Mr. Basher, I know me. I went back for alumni. Every time he asked to come back and talk to kids, I would do it. No problem, because I
Yeah.
love getting people involved and excited about this industry, because he was one of those teachers that was like, make a mistake here. This is where you can figure out what to do. And, we put turbo on a motor and set it on fire by accident. And
Right.
that's the place you can do that. But it was
Right.
exciting. And it was something where you could see the actual physical products of your work come to life. And it got me. The funny part is, as soon as I got into auto shop, I also got into ROP stagecraft. And it was the weirdest divergent piece of what I had. But back when I was younger, also, my grandfather, and he lived up in Oregon, was on a farm.
Mhm.
He was big into woodwork. So I learned a
Okay.
little woodworking, and that was some stuff that my dad translated to me in the garage of things to do. So it was fascinating because it was fun. And when you were working with people, creating things that you could physically,
Yeah.
that were tangible, there was a different reward for it. So I got involved with ROP construction, home builders council. So we were building sheds for competitions and things. And
Yeah.
it was just different. It was, to me, it was still fascinating. Making stuff with my hands was so rewarding that even still, I was going to school to try to become a mechanical engineer. In the back of my head, I was still working with my hands, and that provided me that relief or that kind of escape from the textbook world. And I never realized that it would compel me to come back into it. So
Does work, because I can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure you have some days that are alike, but I mean, I would assume that the majority of your days outside of kind of the
sure.
pandemic that we've had, um, are pretty varied, right? So
Oh,
doing different things one day the next. I mean,
I might be on the East Coast on a television program we're filming for a week, and then come back here and we're discussing, robotic automation and how to get our CNC
right.
machines back online and efficiencies, and then immediately stepping back into a marketing role and trying to negotiate, a new influencer to come in, and then going back out in the field and previewing a new vehicle release from an OEM. So yeah, my schedule for the most part was, I have a framework.
Right.
And every week, Monday through Friday, was rearranging puzzle pieces to make it work. And I couldn't tell you, and this is, my close friends always tell me this, I was not the most accessible person because I couldn't tell you what I was going to do in a month.
Right.
I could
Sure.
barely tell you what I was going to do in 2 weeks. So
Right.
that became part of the lifestyle. Was like, hey, you know what? But that also comes from the fact that if you make yourself available, opportunities will be there for you. And I
Yeah.
never said no. Someone's like, hey, I got something I want you to check out. I take the time, whether it was my time, company time, if it was company time, ask permission, go out there. If it was somewhat relevant. If not, I went on my own time. And even though it
Right.
wasn't relevant to Magnaflow at that point in time, it was still listening and hearing out new ideas and people with concepts and things going on,
Yeah.
because that could influence me, or it just satiated something that I had as a
Yeah.
need to know more.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I mean, one of my kind of hard and fast rules is never say no. Right. Like if somebody says, do you want to go here and check this out? I'm like, let's go. I might not
Yeah.
like it. It might not be my thing, but I never would have experienced it otherwise. Right. So you
Right.
put yourself out there to try to do that. So, okay. So going to the next level, let's turn focus to SEMA a little bit. Right.
Mhm.
Because for people out there that have gone to SEMA or haven't gone to SEMA, when you do go to SEMA, one of the things, and this has got to been, I mean, you guys have been doing this for a while now, the Magnaflow booth right behind Chevrolet for the most part in the central hall, right? That has become kind of an oasis for media people, for celebrities, for everything. And for those that don't know, Rich is set up so you do podcasting from there. There are autograph signings. There is everything. But how did that idea to give kind of SEMA this one spot where people could go and congregate? Because it's such a brilliant idea. And like I saw it, I'm like, why the hell did nobody do this before these guys?
Well, it came from a couple different things. One, like I said, we're a family-owned company, and the family members here have pretty good bead on the pulse of business. And what they noticed was, guess what? How many contracts are we really signing? How many new customers are you really waiting until SEMA to get? And go back, I think I've been to 21 SEMAs almost consecutively. And going back to those early days, the trade shows were more trade shows, but
Yeah.
SEMA was quickly evolving into a media event.
Right.
And what they said is, well, if we're going to spend our money bringing sales here and salespeople and representatives here, what are we really doing differently than what we would do? And why would we wait until 1 month to get the sale when we can do it in the middle of February and just get it done, send the person
Sure.
out there and go sign the contract and get the business? But I think also the media world was changing. What was traditional print magazines, which were such a staple of the automotive world, was transitioning into television. And from television, digital started rearing its head. And today with social media, the immediacy of information and the need to react to it have become so urgent that planning a show a year ahead of time to try to understand what's going to be relevant a year is impossible today.
Right.
And go back 20 years ago when we were first starting to do the SEMA booth planning as a hospitality booth, we had some good people inside. And, it's funny, Craig Lieberman was our marketing director. And he's one of the first people that kind of altered our opinion of the traditional trade show and getting us to look a little bit bigger into how the media reacted and how to harness that. And even after his leaving, we really dove deeper into that world. And that's really been the mainstay of what I've done in the marketing department, has been trying to stay attainable and relevant inside of the people that are of influence in our market. So get those people, their lifestyles, and figure out what things that they like. And then the best part is not just have them read testimonial, involve them in the business, get them to experience what we are, and then let them go out there and tell the world on their own, in their own words, what it was to be a part of the team. And then reconnect them to the people that want to be with them, whether it's other brands, commercial or consumer. And that's where the SEMA concept came up, is let's make this a connection point. So we can have the Mario Andretti's and the Chip Fooses there.
Sure.
For the most of the people out there could never really meet. Now we're going to give you a place to do that. And our partners, once those guys left the outside signing booth that were inside, now our partners had an opportunity to brainstorm and talk with them and have an opportunity to work with them. And then as that business evolved further, of course, you were talking about podcasting and digital was very important to us. We hosted it inside of a building where it just really wasn't relevant at the time. And we've had podcasting for nearly 10 years now, being recorded from in our booth and live broadcasted out. So we've always tried to stay in contact with where that is. And I'll give all that credit to the family and their ability to see that the business part of the business evolved and the event didn't. So we needed to change our presence there to be adaptive to this media presence that was really the focus of what we saw SEMA was really doing.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. It's, And again, for those who haven't been there, it's almost impossible to miss the Magnaflow booth, right? And it's very interesting as somebody who's been able to, privileged enough to get in and kind of go behind the curtain and see it. It really is like this little oasis where media people can go in and talk amongst each other and kind of make and foster those connections that we all need to make in the industry. Yeah, just a brilliant idea that you guys are doing that. It's something that I know and I'm sure everybody else looks forward to going and kind of hanging out there. Okay, so now I have a question, and this one kind of strays a little bit. Okay, what's your favorite attainable car from the 1980s?
Oh,
this is
dear
totally
God.
out of left field. I know. We've been serious. I want to go back to
Yeah.
So I want your favorite attainable car, and I'm going to say, okay, just leave it at attainable from the 1980s and the 90s. So I want two.
80s and 90s. Well, my
Mhm.
problem is most car guys, I would say my immediate thing is to fall back upon. I had a 1986 GMC S15, and that
Oh,
car
okay.
had a 2.8 liter in it. And right as I was moving on to my next vehicle, believe it or not, became a 1998 Cavalier, total opposite trend. But
Yes.
the import thing was in, and I had to go American import.
Yep.
But I was in the process of doing a 350 swap. And today's standard, I'd love to get one of those small square bodies back in with some modern tech and go out and have some
Yep.
fun. So I kind of have a place in my heart to see if I find a good condition, one of the boxy square like
Yep.
GMCs or Chevys at that matter, and seeing what I could do with that. Because it's a full frame car. It'll house the V8, no problem. Live axle rear makes it easy. It's super easy to work on both paint and body because the panels are so easy to, they're heavy steel. You can rework them.
Yep.
They're readily available. So kind of there for the 80s. That would be my go-to.
Everybody that's going to listen to this is going to be like, that's a what? For anybody that's younger than us, they're going to be like, I got to look this thing up. Yeah.
90s. Wow. 90s. I don't know. I kind of have of all the things that I am, I've never been a F body guy. I've worked on literally hundreds. But I had a friend pass just this last year, and the 4th gen Camaro has a weird spot for me in my heart. I've worked on so many of them. I literally have scars on my hands trying to reach the top manifold pieces and on those LS manifolds to get them out from under that cowl, doing head swap, cam swap type stuff. And I don't know, that car today seems so cost effective, but they're garbage as far as the plastics are done, the interior. I don't know what you could do to make those there, but they're such a quick and fun car. If you want to go make a quick road race car, they're cheap to do. The parts are super accessible and they're very LS friendly. The other part about it though is, I don't know, like I said, as I grew into them, when all of my friends had F bodies, I had a similar generation, 5.3 liter truck, just because I couldn't do that because I was like, you freaking, Camaro guys.
Yeah.
And, it was always funny because they had the cars and I always had the one oddball truck. And then I had the 95 Impala SS, and I was always getting the non-traditional sports car, which always meant I had to do 10 times more work to it, bigger converters, more nitrous just to keep up. So I kind of have a weird spot in my heart to go back and maybe make my own version. I never did back then of a 90s Camaro. So I know it's so bow tie and it's disgusting, but
it's not. Listen.
It hasn't been until recently that I have a new appreciation for some other cars. But those are ones that actually probably mean something to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think this just comes with age, right? We always look back upon the cars that we didn't have when we were younger, and even if they were complete shit boxes, we're still like, you're still kind of drawn to them, right? It's funny, like you had mentioned, the Impala SS. I mean, I look at those cars now, and I absolutely love them. I think they're still just it's a New York City taxi cab, full frame car that's basically bomb proof. Like if there could be a nuclear war, you're going to have Caprices and Crown Vics all over the place, and they're still going to be running.
I did wrap mine around a tree, so quite bomb proof.
Well, it's funny. I used to use a 92 Caprice wagon as a film car.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. It was bomb, the suspension was so cush, and it had the tail gunner seat and the tailgate like a pickup. So the suspension would soak up everything when we're filming. It's just a wonderful, wonderful car. But yeah, I think we all kind of go back to that at some point and be like, because I've never been one to say I really want a Ferrari or I really want a
Yeah.
Lamborghini. It's just I'm always like I want, I want the something that the kid that had the car that I always wanted, I just couldn't have it or something like that. So
I had the car on the poster on the wall, but I always looked at it as the unattainable. I always had
yeah,
this weird infatuation with the 959.
yeah,
Back in the day, is like the ultimate sports car. The odd part is like I never realized I would come back. I have a new appreciation. Like I said, I've got some Nissan vehicles that I really today would like to get a hold of that meant nothing to me in the last 2 decades of my life or 3 decades of my life, that now have a place where I'd be like, I kind of dig that car and what it represented
sure.
in its own world. But back then, I had the 959 on the wall. I had a Chevrolet Typhoon. Remember that thing?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, the Blazer all-wheel drive with the Cyclone
yep.
motor. And I also had the oh gosh, what was the last one? Oh, the image of the 300ZX. To me, that was the
Uh-huh.
coolest space car in the world.
Yeah,
All-wheel steering, that super high stuff,
yep.
with the twin turbo 3 liter
Sure.
V6. All of those little keywords of the era were important to me at that point in time, and that was like another car, and it really wasn't a supercar. It was just
Right.
a unique vehicle in its
Sure.
own way.
So okay, so we're coming down to a close. Let me just ask this: what is for 2021? What's on the menu right now? What is Magnaflow going to be doing? What are you going to be doing? And then at the end of this, I need to know where everybody can find you.
Gotcha. So Magnaflow, we're in probably one of our bigger evolutions that we've taken in step, where we've reapproached what is new business. Like I said, the family here has always been very centered around what is the business and how does it really run, rather than just getting complacent with optimizing what we've always been doing. And like I said, we all
Sure.
get stuck in those ruts where we're just like, okay, I did it yesterday. How do we make it a little cheaper, a little faster, and do the same thing? And in the last 2 years, we've introduced some new product lines. We've got, like our X Mod series. So
Hmm.
we went out and said, hey, rather than just worrying about how to make it the most cost-effective value-based item, how do we really get that aspirational customer? Because we are at a point where cars are more expensive. They're getting to
Sure.
be a little bit more about satisfying a particular need, rather than trying to be, okay, well, I have, my weekend warrior, and then I've got my daily driver. Well, people are driving their 1,000 horsepower weekend
Yeah.
cars now. I
All
mean,
the time. Yeah.
that's a thing. So how do you let that person enjoy both aspects of that car? And that's really where XMod came in. Was like, okay, well, we're going to build a modular exhaust that allows you to change parts out, so that you have one exhaust, one purchase, and you don't have to go through, hey, louder, quieter, different
Sure.
configuration. And that concept of creating things that are more utilitarian to a particular niche of the market has how we've been kind of approaching the last few years. So we've come out with things like the Overland series. And
Okay.
in the past, we really were just like, you had different sound levels, but you didn't have a particular product suited to a environment or a lifestyle or community. And that's the way that we're approaching it now. So it's putting
Okay.
out new product lines. So it's being more creative and addressing those needs. But that also means talking to the consumer a lot, which in the old business model, it was like, oh, we pay, third-party groups to go out and represent us to our, distribution
Yeah.
to our end consumer, or we're working through media. Whereas today, here we are today, we're talking to our customers, and
Sure.
we're having this interaction, and we're getting that direct feedback. So that just means we're more reactive. So that's what we're doing here at Magnaflow, is we're trying to understand our market more and become relevant to the people that want to use our product, and build products that they actually want and enjoy, rather than just fit the mold as being good enough.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. So then now for you personally, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I know people if you follow your Instagram address, right? Oxidizer,
Yep, yep.
OIX. What is it?
Yeah, it was my old license plate, because I was a nitrous guy. So all of my cars, to keep up with all my F-body boys, the Chevys were always great with dry nitrous, wet nitrous. So I always had oxidizer. That was the warning plate you always got on the nitrous tank. So that was my
Nice.
license plate, and I kept that as my moniker.
Wonderful. So people can find you at oxidizer at Instagram.com,
Yep,
right? Okay.
yep.
Is that your main outlet?
So that's where I talk about the work stuff, but I also have a lot of my personal projects there that cross
Okay.
over. And you'll see everything. I mean, you get to see me dork out on RC cars every once in a while, because that is something I like to do too. Every once in a while, I'll be building my computers on there. But for the most part, it's about 90% automotive in the current project. And Right now, it's that Chevy Colorado ZR2 Bison. That's been
Yep.
my COVID resolve. I went
Yeah.
out and sold my C7 Corvette, which I loved, because I couldn't use it. There was no tracks available. I couldn't do anything
Right.
with it. And I was just beating it up using it as a daily driver. And I just felt bad as a car guy, breaking my heart using this thing as just a mule to get me back and forth on a 100-mile commute to work. Whereas now I can go off road and jump stuff, and it's a different kind of fast and a different kind of enjoyable.
Yeah, but you've been doing so. Everybody should go and look at Rich's page, because it's really funny. Like, you bought this thing, it literally had no miles on it, and then you were jumping it over shit. And it's like, it's the epitome of, I am not saving it for the next owner. Like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to enjoy it, and I think that's, and you've been enjoying the hell out of that thing. You got a tent in the back and everything.
Oh yeah, it's the cool part about it is it's really the antithesis of everything, and literally you hit it on the head with what you said on saving it for the next owner. My C7 was a beautiful car, and I wanted it to always be that, and literally because I wanted it to have a legacy. And I'm like, why am I not using it up? And it got frustrating, and that's really when I came into this. And that's the minute I came back, the second week I had it, it was 3 feet of air across, up in Big Bear. They were like, I can't believe you jumped that thing. I'm like, it says it can do it, so why not try?
Right. That's very true. And I wish that more people would kind of take advantage of that, right? And it's like, if you have something, listen, we all work to play at some point, right? So use your stuff. Like, get out there, and like, everybody always just say, they're like, how many miles have you put on your cars? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm at the point where, like, my 69, like the Daytona clone and the Charger, they're worn out, because I put like 65,000 like foot to the floor miles on each one of them, and they're both going in this year and getting redone. Both cars are getting completely stripped and redone, because I'm going to fix them, and I am going to wear them out again. Right.
Well, and that's the best part, is it's, to me, I get all the things I love to do, which is like, albeit it's a new car and you get that new car feeling for a couple of weeks and do whatever. It's like, well, I also get to go play now. So I jumped it and I realized I got to do some stuff on the suspension. I want to put some bigger tires on it. So it kind of just keeps that momentum going on the next project. And at the same time, though, it was also something that the utility wasn't just a project car, because the worst thing I think I did in my past is we've all suffered from this. We have garages full of cars that don't run, or things that significant others and spouses say, what the hell is this? You got this brick outside, go finish your damn project. And I live in an apartment, so having non-running vehicles sitting out there and doing the shuffle to make sure stuff goes, it's a challenge. So having these projects that are evolutions that, I think is more reflective of the consumer today, where they're doing piecework, and they're not just building it for the sake of a purpose build. And there's still those guys out there. They're that 5%.
Sure.
But you can enjoy your car and go through this evolution of the car, and it gets to be a part of you, and you get to live through it. And that's I think that new message that goes out with the car builder today is, it's, maybe you're putting on a $500 part and that's all you do for 2 months. And you go, but you're enjoying it in between. Whereas the old days, I go trailer that thing in a corner, strip it all down to the guts, and it sat for 7 months while I tried to get parts together and justified why I was paying storage fees for a car that didn't run.
Yeah. No, it's God, I know that all too well. Well, I'll tell you, Rich, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to talk. We got to have you back on again real soon. So I think we need to, you got to come back on, I'm thinking, in a couple of months, and we could start talking about SEMA and what's going on for that. Knock on wood, everybody will be there, and it'll be, back in action. And
I miss you guys. I mean, that's the thing.
That's the other thing.
We're the separate. We're the family that doesn't get together anymore.
I know it, and that's tough. And I don't think people realize that. Like, that SEMA is that one time of year that everybody just reconnects, and we can go out to dinner, we can get a couple of drinks, we can hang out, we can bullshit about what we all love. So, again, Rich, thank you so much, man. It is always a pleasure, my friend.
Take care.
All right, Rich. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.